Over the past few years, everything has changed. Where and how we work and live, the way we collaborate and measure success, and the emerging technologies we use to get it all done. Welcome to The Bridge. Join our host, Scott Kinka, in a series of discussions with top leaders in technology and learn about how they bridge their lives and their businesses into our new hybrid work and AI-driven reality. Our hope is that the insights and experiences will help you on your journey in business and in life from who we were to who we are today. And maybe it'll help you get better prepared for whatever comes next. The Bridge is a service of Bridgepoint Technologies, the nation's leading IT advisory firm. Bridgepoint helps business leaders evaluate, procure, implement, and manage technology and customer experience solutions with a focus on realizing sustainable results for your business growth. And now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
Historically, IT has been a very physical thing. Devices, wide area networks, data centers in our office. Eventually, we wised up. We started moving things out to data center facilities that were better suited to house our physical equipment. There's nothing more physical than data center space. It's one of the very few things that we engage in IT, where the service itself is about the physical footprint. In some ways, it's a real estate business. So how does arguably the world's largest data center provider think about our physical economy becoming a digital one, and our digital economy moving to a data economy? And how does the physical data center figure into the way we plan our digital and data assets? Data needs to be in a place where both the consumer and the producer can exchange or meet on that data at the speed that's required to produce the outcome. My guest is Tony Bishop, Senior Vice President of Enterprise Platform Solutions for Digital Realty. Tony comes from the financial services sector as an infrastructure leader from Morgan Stanley and Wachovia. He's been through a SaaS startup, and he also spent time with Dell EMC. So bottom line, he's one of us, and he's been thinking about the flip for a long time. If we're helping you flip the way you're thinking about IT, please give The Bridge with Scott Kinka a like, comment, follow, or favorite on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite platform. But now let's talk about digital meeting places with Tony Bishop, Senior Vice President of Enterprise Platform Solutions for Digital Realty. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of The Bridge. Super excited to have you with us, and I'm super excited to have Tony Bishop with us. Tony is the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Platform Solutions, or at least, Tony, that's what the LinkedIn says. Why don't you tell me what that means for you on a day-to-day basis at Digital Realty?
Absolutely. It means that I'm the one stuck figuring out how we build our platform, we create solutions, and we're relevant to the enterprise segment of our business.
I like that. And it leaves lots of room for interpretation that we're going to figure out in the next little while. How long have you been at Digital Realty, Tony?
Coming up on 5 years.
5 years. Tell us a little bit more about Tony before that.
You'll hear a funny accent. I'm originally Canadian, born and raised, lived and worked across Europe, Asia Pacific, and now I am an American citizen.
Okay.
Based in Dallas. My whole career has been in enterprise IT, both on the buy side and the sell side. So I've ran infrastructure for companies like Morgan Stanley and Wachovia Bank. I did my own software as a service startup that's now part of Dell EMC. And I've worked in the, on the service provider side, in the data center space for, a good 12 years now.
Fantastic. I love that. We had Chris Sharp. We were just actually doing the math, Gene and I, before the episode, literally on the show. I think we recorded a year and a week, literally to the day. We talked quite a bit about the pandemic at that time, which we're trying to strike that from our memories. So we won't dwell too much, but we certainly will talk about hybrid work. For those who didn't catch that episode, though, tell us, just give us the readout, Digital Realty. How about the top level commercial for us?
Yeah, I mean, digital sits in a very unique vantage point and is probably one of the best kept secrets in the industry. It's the largest data center platform provider in the world. That means in terms of data center capacity, where companies of all types can come and deploy their infrastructure, and connect it to the external world, reach their customers, reach their employees. We are the largest. We're also what you would call probably the most fit for purpose in that we accommodate any scale of deployment, any form of connectivity, and we do that around 6 continents around the world, 28 countries, approaching 60 metros that you can deploy and connect your infrastructure, not only in that metro, but you can also now have it so that it can actually connect to other metros over our own backbone. So it's pretty exciting that really allows where we serve customers from large enterprises to the largest hyperscalers and network carriers to everybody in between. And, in partnerships like with Bridgepoint, is a great way to reach and bring value and new outcomes to the market. So that's us.
No, I appreciate that. And interest of full disclosure, and and our listeners know that most often our guests are partners of ours. Bridgepoint as an advisory firm, we feel a great kinship to Digital Realty, obviously, and we push a lot of data center space. We happen to be the global channel partner of the year for Digital Realty last year. Certainly proud of that, and it's been a great partnership for us. Usually, I ask at this point what the company's superpower is. I think you just answered that, though, to some extent, which is, breadth and scale in data center operations. But is there anything besides that you think that you should mention?
I think the only thing which I think will probably set up well for our conversations today is kind of what's our strategic purpose and focus. And we believe that the world is shift from, it's gone from a physical economy to a digital economy to now it's going to a data economy. And kind of our purpose and what we're doing to take this breadth and depth and capability set and scale is to create a data meeting place. Because the world's going to be more and more distributed. The more digital, the more data, the more physical distribution occurs. The more that distribution occurs, no matter what you're trying to solve, that means more infrastructure, more data needs to be able to be in a place where both sides of who's consuming and exchanging that data or applications need to be able to meet. So you're going to hear us where we're talking about what we call the data meeting place. And, and our platform is called PlatformDIGITAL, but it's really the data meeting place of enabling that. And I think that's probably maybe not necessarily a superpower, but a super purpose.
Yeah, I like that, a super purpose. It's funny, when you were mentioning your own network backbone, I took a note and just kind of circled it. So I got back into it. And given what you just said about sort of the data meeting place, maybe it's the right spot to drop that question in. As a data center provider, do you have to be in the network business at this point, given the way that companies are transacting online?
You have to be at a point where you cannot be an individual island. So what we've realized is, as a global platform, it needs to be that customers, even the carriers as customers, have the ability to turn on a site and reach another site without necessarily have to wait to pull a line, turn something on, right? Create another circuit, etc. So over the last 3 years, we've worked hard at understanding what does that need to look like, and how is it so that all of our campuses are logically and physically connected. So that means you can turn on and reach other participants or other metros with your own infrastructure, or other third parties that are in those other metros. And that's a complement to the network carriers, who are a large customer set of ours, because it allows them to be able to test new markets. It allows them to be able to start and pop a new market and then be able to connect back to an old one before they even have to get their own infrastructure there. So it's become a very differentiated kind of capability set. And why it's important is because it's not distributed to one location. Everybody's going to distribute to many locations. So that's kind of why. So the answer is yes, we are the second largest interconnection provider in the world, and and growing very rapidly. And to us, it's just another way of that paradigm is not just connect directly in a market, it's connect across the market and in between markets.
It's funny, you mentioned in that answer, you said over the last 3 years. So I think the question, let's time that back. Obviously, there's a COVID conversation there. Am I getting the timing of that right? Is that sort of
You
a
are. You
change in
are.
state?
Yep, you're going down the right path. I mean, we launched what we call Service Fabric. And
Yeah.
Service Fabric was our vision that we announced in 19 with um, the publishing of a manifesto that said that this is becoming a data-driven world, which we talked about at the opening.
Yeah.
It's going to require a different networking paradigm. You know, the concept of cross connect is powerful, but it has to go beyond the cross connect. And it has to go beyond the cross connect between two counterparties. It needs to become a many to many, and it needs to orchestrate across many different networks, which comes back to why that concept of a meeting place.
Yeah.
Right? Because not one network will solve everything. So you have to be able to have networks that can aggregate in and out, traffic that comes in and out, data exchange that comes in and out of different networks at some meeting place where it can aggregate and gain value, but then still reach far back out where it's supposed to go.
Completely. So your manifesto around that was published in 2019. And obviously something crazy happened the year later. So you were headed this way. Would we be where we are now, or better stated, would you be where you are now with sort of that connectivity fabric being central to your story, were it not for COVID? Or would we still be,
I think
you'd be moving
COVID,
there, but maybe with less pace.
Yeah, I think COVID was a good catalyst. I look at it and go, there was good parts of COVID that accelerate, but also, there's still, it also was a way that distracted from possible innovations too.
Okay.
So I'm probably more of a, I can see the half full and half empty perspective of it all.
Yeah.
Right, Scott.
Right.
Which may or not be the same for the others. Even in our own firm. But you look. There's parts of COVID on digital transformation that were great. Even in the case of digital workplace, hybrid work. But even that's now got to go through a whole nother evolution of what was built for completely remote now needs to be able to combine, transient people in different locations and yet need the same experience and capability set.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think parts of COVID did really well to accelerate digital transformation in general, but you still have security, you still have data, you still have regulations, and now you have even advancement in technology that's going to be fused with AI, that now all has to be accommodated. And cybersecurity threats haven't gone away.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, and that's not to be a poo-poo, or negative about it. It's a very positive, but it's a reality that says, hey, that acceleration now has opened the door for even more transformation that's got to occur.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, the base unit of measure in our networks change, right? In a lot of ways, from locations to humans, right? I mean,
Yep.
I love what you said earlier about, we went 100% remote. Now you got to figure out how to do it hybrid. At the end of the day, the end user, the IT person is building, two networks, or better yet, just saying, we're not really in the network business. We're in the people security business, and we don't care where they work, right? Interesting. Has that precipitated sort of you guys being at the middle of that data meeting place? I mean, it used to be that the data meeting place for a company was the headquarters, logically, right? So,
Yeah.
And perhaps the outsourced data center location that they had with Digital Realty was adjunct to the headquarters. But at the end of the day, the process still was security perimeter at headquarters, drag the users back over VPN or some other technology, and then back out to the internet. Now the apps have moved out. The headquarters is less important. I mean, that's really I think that's what you mean when you're talking about you guys becoming way more central, as being that data meeting place. Do I have that right?
Yeah. Yeah, you do. It's we talk about it being a pervasive data center architecture. And what we see is that you're going to have these distributed centers where data exchange occurs. And what's going to trigger that is endpoints, devices, employees, concentration of buildings, offices, warehouses, shipping centers, et cetera, that need to operate within a reasonable proximity of distance. So you serve both physics from a latency, but also from a throughput. And then to the point where data is being created now at the edge, which used to be versus at the headquarters or the centralized office, Now what's happening is it's being created at the edge. It needs to be brought back in at least to a approximate or adjacent to, where there's concentration and value to. So the tipping points become is I have to plan and size within geo-distance tagging of my employees and my functions in my physical world with a digital presence.
Yeah.
And I got to do that where it's my own capabilities, and I have to meet public clouds, my networks, and my third-party partners.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you just mentioned meeting the hyperscalers. I mean, I imagine that whether you call them customers or partners in this case is probably less relevant than there's just a larger number of people. But I imagine your constituencies have also expanded pretty significantly, right? It's not just the end customer who's taking a rack, but it's the network you're interconnecting with. It's the hyperscaler or the SaaS provider that's ending up getting a lot of your traffic. I mean, are the number of folks that you're talking to on a day-to-day basis in your ecosystem markedly larger now than it was 3 or even say 5 years ago?
Yeah. We actually did that exercise recently, even for our board strategy update. We went from about 1,200 customers to over 5,000, in the last 4 to 5 years. Some of that's been inorganic, but a lot of that's been organic. A lot of that's been organic and with partners like yourselves, where you have enterprises connecting their own capabilities and their own employees. You have enterprises connecting to other enterprises. You have enterprises now connecting to SaaS and PaaS platforms that are building out outside of the public cloud. You have public clouds bringing not just compute and access, but now they have new edge and hybrid offerings. You have an evolution of new managed service providers dropping in their own management nodes, wrapping a bunch of what we just talked about. You have the network completely transforming from what really was a networked environment to serve consumers and eyeballs to now to enabling, local, regional, and global connectivity of workflows, and workflows that are secure and workflows that are performant and compliant. So it really is, right, when you draw a circle and you look at all the different participants, the diversity and the density of it in each of these major metros is significantly amplifying.
Yeah. And that's a great description of what you mean by that data meeting place. So I love that. Super interesting. When we were on with Chris last year, he made a statement that I loved. He said, capacity is the new data center currency. And it's a trend that we see. Now, granted, that was a year ago. So asking you to back, is capacity still a scarcity discussion in data center in your mind? Have we grown into some of that hyperscale pre-buy? Like, what's happening in your world and your feelings around, the availability of average customer on the street to be able to find a rack with sufficient power in the metro they want to be in?
Yeah, there's so one, Chris is usually right. So building off of that, there's really two major buckets of capacity types that we see. And then I'll answer the question. But organizing, there is small and chunky type of capacity on one side that both enterprises and service providers are deploying. So this is in cabinets, cages and halls that are for a power proxy measure under a megawatt. And then there are large deployments that were hyperscale, now are hyperscale plus big AI farms, right? And in all cases, it depends on what are the attributes I'm trying to achieve. Lowest unit cost, total cost of ownership, performance and cost blend, performance. And so what that's really setting up is it's creating a tiered deployment of latency sensitive downtown type, meet me room, telco carrier hotel type deployments, and then connected suburbs that have, a very efficient connectivity and diverse connectivity model between the downtown and the suburb, where the chunkier stuff's going, or the large stuff's going.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's becoming something more and more prevalent and standardized. And then in terms of it, physical complexity is much harder than digital complexity.
Yeah.
So to your point, yes, it's scarce, because what Chris is really alluding to is that, one, power and alternative power sources is going to become something that we see in the data center space. You'll see evolutions to, private sourcing of power with companies like ourselves, where you're running like microgrids, because the main power grid utilities just aren't built for it, nor can handle the variability with it, and also the service level requirements. So I think on one side you're going to see that powers a scarcity, and that's going to then affect, so on. But then number two, land in major metros, is disappearing. So you have a space concentration issue, which means then, okay, it's not just horizontal buildings. I got to go more vertical. So I got power to the campus. I then have connectivity I've got to figure out how to solve, which even getting fiber in and out of places is becoming more difficult. Populations are growing. Then you've got differences of how you're going to have to build data centers, because you're probably going to have to go more vertical, because there isn't as much room to go as wide.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes permitting process, construction process. How do you do that, making sure that people are safe as they're building all of this out? How do you make it so that it's storm proof, resilient, can handle hurricanes, floods, chaos of weather changes? And then how do you power and cool it? Because even that's changing.
Yeah.
So I think Chris was right, is that the premium of the physical space is going to go up because the complexity is going up. So scarce, yes, but money and time will address that. But it's more of I would turn it to be, the scarcity is there, but it means that it will get solved, but it gets solved at a premium. And that is anybody, it doesn't matter the type of company, if you're not thinking about where you have to physically place infrastructure and how you do it, and you leave that to an afterthought, you're going to design wrong, and you're not going to achieve optimal performance, experience, TCO, etc.
Mm-hmm. So two things I want to read back that you mentioned in there that I sort of had on my list. One is, I think it probably is a little bit different, or at least you were seeing the very beginning of it when we spoke to Chris last year. We talked a lot about scarce assets, where it was really sort of the hyperscalers competing with the individual customer who's looking for a specific geo and a specific concentration in power and rack, which I totally get. The thing that's probably new, and I want a little bit of an explanation on it, is really around the AI companies, right? And that they are, assuming for the sake of argument that maybe the hyperscale pre-buys are starting to trail off, or they're going into their capacity. We had another behemoth come in and start buying. What makes the AI workload in your physical facilities different than either the individual customer consumer or the hyperscalers?
Yeah, so I think one is it's perfect with that meeting place analogy that we started with, Scott, which is on each side of the fence, there's two types of AI deployments that we need to be cognizant of. There is AI in terms of prediction and inference that will be what I run in production to support a workflow day to day. And that's smaller. That's more traditional colo, cabinet, cage, suite level deployments. And that's what's going to follow with the hype of what's going on now, which is the hype and the build out is where the mass build out's occurring is on the other side of the fence, both the clouds and non-clouds. There's this new AI farms being built for training. So I've got to teach and train the model versus I got to run the model. If I'm running the model, that's traditional value prop colo right? I deploy it downtown, I deploy it in proximity in a suburb, and I have good good
Yep.
connectivity to downtown so that it can respond in, milliseconds to seconds, depending on what the workflow and the workload is, right? And who the user or applications are. So when we look at it, what we see is we also see, hey, in some cases, it makes sense to train those models in secondary markets or primary markets, but in a secondary type building. I.e., it may not be one of the ones right where the meet me rooms are, right? And the concentration, it may be within the campus. What is different is the use of water, right? And the use of some form of liquid cooling that is going to vary depending on the company. One of the things that we take pride is we were one of the early movers to recycled water and using water very efficiently. And that has set us up well where we have hundreds of deployments of AI now where cabinet level, the power to a single cabinet is 70 kW and higher.
Wow.
And we're cooling it, right, by bringing units next to it, which basically says that's as far as I'm going to go. And customers are only willing to take that risk. That says, yes, a line could break, but it's isolated. My blast space of what could get at risk is isolated to that cabinet, or maybe not even at all.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I immerse, you hear all this immersion technology, I'm at complete risk. And a lot of people, so there's going to be phases of what that looks like. But to answer your question, the power density, the cooling, and the strategy of how you build infrastructure out to accommodate is changing.
Yeah.
Like the cabling just alone, Scott, for these AI environments, has to be high performance. Well, you get over certain lengths of like 10 feet, and all of a sudden you have to go from copper to fiber or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to become very expensive, and you also have performance issues. So it kind of reminds me of a little bit what we learned because, the early A models, when I worked on Wall Street, were very much about the length of the cable, and the length of the cable between, servers could make a difference of could I trade that in microseconds to milliseconds or not?
Yeah.
And so that hasn't gone away. It's now just being extrapolated even to larger scale computing versus a trading engine sitting on a single cabinet with maybe, a handful of servers.
Yeah. So, said simply, there's a lot of great information in there. AI is wreaking havoc on your traditional models of ratios of cooling and power to physical space, which, in and of itself is going to create some scarcity in buying in the traditional model, right? So that
And
I think that in a lot of ways,
add the word.
Go please.
Sorry, I was going to say add the word contiguous. So
Yeah.
you were add to contiguous space is going to become important because if you don't have the data next to the compute, it's not going to be intelligent.
Sure.
And so you've got to bring the compute and the data together. And data itself, when you start talking about large data lake houses, data warehouses, and then you start talking about enough computing power to, that are basically supercomputing environments, the contiguous space to accommodate both of those, is moving from, what would be a significant evolution. It's not large cages, it's large suites and large halls.
Yeah.
And then you still have the need for cages and cabinets, for the smaller stuff.
Sure. Which is all the more reason to your earlier point that, for the standard workload planning is important, right? Because you're not just going to be able to snap your fingers and say, I need a traditional workload in this metro right now. Can I have it next week? It just, that's not the way to do this.
And how you do the capacity planning. So like for us, one of the things that we've done is, we've built out a whole data science approach around the concept of data gravity, which is the amount of data being created and processed and exchanged between, private companies and public platforms.
Yeah.
And we've broken that down by every metro. We've actually, the formula plus our methodology of how to go design, we're just granted patents for in the last 30, 90, 60 days.
Yeah.
And and one of the things that we've done there is we've quantified now what we think are the number of servers, compute and storage servers that need to sit on each side of the firewall for a typical enterprise in that market over the next 5 years. Because if you don't start planning out your 5 year, your physical environment on more of a 5 year basis, and having it reserved and laid out so that I can accommodate it, you could run into troubles and issues of contiguous, performant, available, constrained, etc. too.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just the matter of, hey, we're out of space, let's go take some in the next building, when these applications require proximity at a level that, is kind of unprecedented in the way that we thought about our workloads previously.
It is. And that's that's the exciting part for providers like ourselves is we understand this. Our job is to make it easier for them. But I think it's, and for companies, the more you think about solving the physical as you're solving what's needed digitally, I think it's going to really create a competitive advantage because it's going to be those that are disciplined, that do take the longer perspective and the holistic perspective, are going to end up having more performant infrastructure and are more capable than those that aren't.
Yeah. I want to get a little deeper on one topic related to power that maybe we didn't get into yet, which, I guess this is the hype versus reality question, right? Which is, we talk about ESG initiatives in large businesses. We talk about, certainly there's a little bit more of a power trading economy and other areas, particularly in the EU right now. But that conversation is happening while simultaneously we just had this conversation about AI becoming this giant power consumer and sort of all of that changing. How often is the ESG conversation coming into data center discussions with end customers in terms of the efficiency of power, where it's coming from, carbon credits, all the things or is it really just sort of still window dressing related to the conversation that you're having?
It's real, but I think it's real in a balanced way.
Okay.
Like if you think about the one is, are you committed to creating a more sustainable and durable future? Sure. Right. That has to be. And that's hitting at least larger companies. That's becoming, it's becoming table stakes.
Yeah.
Because for them, they're defining that has to be part of it. Now it's 10, 15, 20 years out, depending on which company, which plan, which region. So I think you have to balance it. And that's why I say it's table stakes and it's part of it. But, you go to each region, you go to each metro, you start to look at what you were just saying. There's compliance and regulations in each metro that now have to be met. As soon as you get outside of the United States, there's security issues that in every deployment that you do, you've got to think security with it. So you got to think compliance and regulations, especially around data and data movement. You got to think about security in each of those environments. You have to think about networking doesn't go away.
Of course.
It's just changing. How do I network my world that's coming across many different ways and interacting with many different systems? And then, oh, by the way, it needs to be, can it be on at least equivalent sustainable power?
Yeah.
And that's why I said to you earlier, I think you're going to see an evolution over the next 10 years where I predict that at least the leading data center providers are going to be basically building out, in a lot of these major metros, their own grids.
Yeah.
More like natural gas, microgrid type. And then, hey, any excess or heat capture, you can give back to the public grid. Right. So I think there's a lot of opportunity that makes it more durable, is part of the table stakes, but is a reality that says it's not like I'm only going to do one or the other. And that's why I say to you, AI needs data. AI needs clean data. Are we living in a world where each company has clean data? Right. Yeah. And I can tell you that from our own data to all the companies we serve. So you start to go like, hey, data is a big problem. Security is a big problem. Sustainable power, renewable power is a big problem. Over time, you're going to see with initiatives like even from like iMasons and so on, everything net new going into new buildings, green builds or greenfield builds, be basically net zero. And but what are you going to do with the legacy builds? Because it's not like, you're going to take a downtown building that's a historic building and rip it all apart. So you got to go, how far can you get? But is it something that has to be in the intentions and best efforts of everybody? And is it becoming a reality of part of the conversation? Yes, but not as a standalone. It's not the only criteria. It's one of the key criteria, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And we could continue to geek out on this. I think we covered a lot of ground in a really short period of time. You've given us a lot to think about. And I'm super excited to sort of read this back and take some notes from it and build my intro for when this thing goes live. In the interest of time, Tony, I'm going to shift to some fun, if that's okay, before we wrap. The first one, I mean, maybe you consider this fun, maybe you don't, but I'm going to ask you for a shameless prediction for somewhere in the next 12 to 18 months. It could be in tech. It could be in politics. It could be in sports. It doesn't matter to me. Just give me something, 12 to 18 months.
12 to 18 months. My favorite football team, the San Francisco 49ers, will have won the Super Bowl again.
Okay. Well, we will. Oftentimes, these are around football. So at the end of the season, we're going to put them all together in one edit, and we'll see where that is. I'm from Philadelphia, so you know how I feel about that statement. But hey, it's all good.
I think both you and I are sitting in a very potentially, opportune time of window in the next 2 years.
I would agree.
So if you take 18 months, that includes this Super Bowl and the next one.
Okay.
So I think between it, both teams have a really good shot.
Yeah.
So it'd be fun.
Okay, I love that. This one, pretty straightforward. What are you reading right now? Is there anything that you'd recommend? Business related or even fiction, if it's valuable?
You know what? There's 3 books. I'm just looking at them because they're literally sitting over on a counter. So one is McKinsey came out with a new book McKinsey Partners wrote called Rewired.
Okay.
I'd recommend it for everybody. It does a really good job of talking about digital business, data, AI, and how it's going to affect companies and how to organize. The second one is The Future of a Competitive Strategy, which really gets into, so how do you create a competitive strategy with everything being disrupted? How do you use data, etc.? And then the third is Tom Davenport, the professor out of Babson, does some Harvard stuff too. He wrote a book called Working with AI. Okay. And what I'm really doing with those is trying to understand what's the new business paradigm and architecture going to look like. How do these technologies converge and fuse together, right, to create new workflows, new intelligence, new outcomes, or intelligence-based outcomes? And so I'd recommend all 3 after doing homework, because it's what's driving my interest and my view is how do we all see this world converging, and what can it be? So the better we can balance that with what we talked about today, the physical side, and help teach partners, customers, providers, then the beauty is I do not think it's a zero-sum game. I think it's an unbounded game.
Yeah. That's an amazing and thoughtful answer there. I appreciate that. So here's the last one. Let's just assume whatever the next big, pandemic style event is, let's call it dystopian level kind of event. One application's functioning on your phone for whatever the future holds. What's that application?
For me?
Yeah.
It's still email.
Okay. It's okay. I like it. Care to back up?
I guess
why?
I'm old. I'm old, boring, basic.
Answer.
Yeah. I think email becomes, because if you do email right, it can be an experience of truly email message, right? So I'm my definitions of, hey, I need to be able to instantaneously have a dialogue that can take the form of just document it with reference, can be, video or text, right? Or messaged. So to me, it's all part of it, but email at the core, because if you think about it, is probably the best proxy for how businesses complete workflows, or even how they use applications which then generate workflows.
Got it. Well, that one we could read back on for a little while, but we are largely out of time. So I appreciate the time today. If anyone, Tony, wants to learn a little bit more about digital realty, other than reaching out to their friendly neighborhood Bridgepoint strategist, how should they do so?
Well, obviously, go to .com. Feel free to ping any of the executives like myself on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. We are a very humble, hungry, hardworking company. Our new CEO, who was our president CFO, has excellent values and leads by example that way.
Yeah.
We try to make ourselves accessible always and be responsive. So I would say, LinkedIn or partners like yourselves getting us on the phone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tony, I appreciate that. That's a good segue towards our close here. My guest today on the bridge has been Tony Bishop. Tony, I really appreciate your time. Tony, as I mentioned, is the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Platform Solutions with Digital Realty, a really important partner for Bridgepoint and our strategist. And we're really excited to have had you on the show today. Tony, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott, and wish everybody the best.
Thanks so much. Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepoint Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepoint, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointtechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepoint, or simply reach out to me at Skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.